Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are diving into Amazon Web Services, specifically how to effectively use EC2 auto-scaling groups and network load balancers. If you are looking to build a robust, scalable application, you won't want to miss this one. So let's jump in. First off, what exactly is EC2 auto-scaling? In simple terms, it automatically adjusts the number of EC2 instances in your application based on demand. This means you can handle traffic spikes and save costs when traffic is low. Pretty cool, right? With auto-scaling, you define policies that detect when to scale your instances. This can be based on metrics like CPU usage or request count. Now, let's set up an auto-scaling group and see how this works. All right, so before we begin, make sure you go to your AWS console. So once you're in AWS console, what we want to do first of all is to create what we call a launch template. So a launch template is going to allow you to use your auto scaling to scale up your resources. So the launch template is more like a template that we use to launch the individual EC2 instances. That means you contain the configuration that is required for that. But before we hit that one, let's first of all set up our security group, and then we can use that in a launch template. So to do that, let's go onto the AWS console, and then let's search for security group. Okay, so to set up a security group, simply click on create. And in here, we can then configure our security group. So what I'll do is here is give it a security group a name. So I'm just going to name this one as Web Server SG. And then you can give it a description. So I'm just going to use the same name as the description. I'll use the VPC provided here. I'm not going to change that. And so here is the meat of the whole thing here, setting out these inbound rules. So we're going to set up 2 inbound rules. So the first rule, we will set it out for SSH. So once you click on it on the type, you can click on the custom, and then you can just simply search for SSH. Select the SSH, that will be port 22, and then the source, we can select any IPv4, and then we can add a secondary rule as well for the inbound. So likewise, we click on the custom TCP, and then you can type in HTTP. So we're going to add port 80 as well, and likewise under the source, we set this to any IPv4. Right, for the description for the SSH, we can type in SSH here, and for the HTTP, we can type in HTTP here as well. So once we define these 2 policies, then we can proceed to create the security group. So just scroll down and click on create security group. Right, so we have the security group created. So after creating a security group, we can proceed to create our launch template. To do that, we can simply click on launch template under the instances here, and that will bring you your EC2 launch template. Right, so then we can click on create launch template, and then we can proceed to fill in the details. So for the launch template name, I will name this one as my web server cluster. And for the description, I'll use the same name for the description here. And I'll select provide guidance to help me set up the template that I can use with my EC2 auto scaling. So this will give you more instructions based on the setup. All right. So now navigate to the bottom here, click on Quick Start. We're going to use Amazon machine, so you can click on the Amazon Linux, and I mean, all up to you. You can select any of the Linux ones you've got here, Ubuntu or Amazon Linux, but I'll go with the Amazon Linux here. And in the drop down here, I will select this specific Amazon instance here, the Amazon Linux 2. All right, so this is essentially going to build a template that we can use for all our EC2 instances when auto scaling. Right, so once we select that, then we can proceed to select the instance type. So for the instance type, we can go with the T2 macro. That should do the job. That's a free version. So if you're testing this out, you can actually set this up, and it's not going to cost you any money based on the instance you select. Then you can proceed to set up your key pair. All right, so with a key pair, I'm going to set up a new key pair for this specific test. So I'll set this one as key pair test. Then I'll create the key pair. Then I'll save it. All right, so the key pair is now saved. So I got the private key saved, and the public will still remain on AWS. All right, so with that one out of the way, we can then proceed to the network session. So in a network session, this is where we can select our security group that we created. So click on the drop down and select a security group to be used in this specific launch template. Right. Now, with that selected, we can then proceed to more details around the advanced session. So I'm just going to scroll to the bottom here. I'll keep everything as it is. I'm not going to make any changes to the volume, but under the advanced details, I'll drop this down, and then I'll need to go into CloudWatch to enable that. So we want to use the CloudWatch to monitor for any CPU spike. So let's say our EC2 instance hit a 50% CPU, spin up another EC2 instance to support the load. Right, so let's scroll down, and we're looking for the CloudWatch. All right, so it should be up here somewhere. There you go. So details, CloudWatch monitor. I will enable that, and then we will proceed to add a user data. So that will be a data that will spin up our EC2 instance, and then we can use that one in terms of spinning up our instances. So scroll to the bottom here. And what I'll do here is I'm just going to paste in my user data. All right, so I'll paste the script in here. So I'll put this script right in the video, so that video description, so you can have access to this script as well. All right, so what this script is going to do is to deploy HTTPD, and then we will use that for the web server essentially. So that means once you go into the port 80, you should be able to see their website essentially. And there is an information here about stressing the CPU as well. So that will be used for testing out the CPU to spike it up and to mimic in a scenario whereby there is high load on the CPU, which in effect will cause the autoscaling to kick in. All right, so with that out of the way, we can proceed to create our launch template. Right, so now with the launch template created, what we will do is we proceed to create our load balancer. So to do this, let's click on this menu here, And then we can scroll down and we should see load balancer. So click on the load balancer and then we can create load balancer by clicking this button here. So once you click this, we are going to create a network load balancer. So what a network load balancer will do is it will allow us to balance our traffic. So when you choose this, it's very good in the sense that it will utilize the UDP and also the TCP traffic stream. So if you want to know more about this, you can obviously read more information about what this actually does here by reading the instructions here. So I'll click on this option here. And then under the load balancer name, I'll proceed to give our load balancer a name. So I'll name this one as my load balancer. And I'll keep this one as internet facing. Internet facing. I'm not going to make any changes to that. Scroll down to the mapping session, and in the mapping here, I'm just going to select this to availability zone. So essentially, actually, I think what I probably will do is I'll go and select all the availability zones that are available to me. All right, so once you select all the availability zones, that means any of these zones, we can deploy our EC2 instances to them. So then you can proceed to the security group session, remove the default one and select the security group that we created, which is the web server SG. And then we can scroll down to the net listening session. And here is where you define which port the traffic should hit from outside your network. So we want the traffic to be coming from port 80, but then we need to create a target group. So click on create a target group, which will open up a new tab, and then we can define our target group from here. So in a target group, for the type, we will select instance. So that means we can leverage the instances for our target group. And for that, we could probably have to proceed to name it. So let me see what name I should give this. I'll give it a name as Web1. And then we can proceed to the protocol. So for the protocol, we leave the protocol at port 80. And we can move on to the health check session. So for the health check, I'll switch this one to TCP. And then I'll click on the advanced session here. And then in advanced session, I'll scroll down and set the intervals to 10. So that means this will be the health check time frame. So each 10 seconds, we will check individual target just to make sure that they are up and running. So by checking it in the shorter time frame, this will help in terms of checking the state of the EC2 instances. So in case they are down, it's quicker. So within 10 seconds, we already know that obviously the instance is down, and then we can bring our server back online, a new server instances to come back to take over as well. Right. So once we have all of that set, then we can obviously proceed to click on next. And we can then create the target group. Okay, so that is created as Web1. So going back to the first tab, we should now be able to select it from here by refreshing this, and then the Web1 should show up. And we have to select that. So once we select that, then we can then proceed to save the settings as well and move to the next page. So now scroll to the very bottom and then click on create load balancer. So this will now proceed to create our load balancer. Okay, so once the load balancer is created successfully, let's bring this load balancer up. So my load balancer is selected already. So we can drop this one down and then we can go into the attribute of our load balancer. And this attribute, we're going to enable cross zone load balancing. So which means that each load balancer can make sure that the traffic can actually move across of multiple zones, availability zones. So I'll select that one and then I'll save the settings here. All right, so once that is saved, now let's move back to the menu on the left side and select the target groups. So click on the target groups, and in a target group, we should see our target group that we created. So let's select that target group. And once we select it, we will see the attribute option here. Click on the attribute and then click on edit. And we're just going to make some few changes to this as well. So we just want to make sure that when we are registering, we have a more like a shorter time frame for the registration of these instances. So I'm just going to limit this time to 30 seconds to shorten this up. And once we set that up, we can then proceed to save that settings as well. All right, so once that is saved, we can then proceed to create our auto scaling group. So now it's on the left side, scroll to the very bottom and then click on auto scaling group. So this is where we will proceed to create our auto scaling and use all the various components that we just created. So then click on create auto scaling group. Now give the auto scaling group a name. So I'll name this one as my auto scaler. All right. I mean, the name have to be something that is meaningful to you. So whatever name you want to give it is all up to you. So now we're going to put everything that we've created so far together. So we go into the launch template, select the launch template that we created. And then we can proceed to click on next. And once we click on next in the VPC, I will leave the VPC as it is. And in the availability zone and subnets, I will just select just the two here. Leave the rest. And I'll proceed to click on next. And now on the load balancer session, we will select that I do have a new, I already have in the load balancer. So I'll click on the attach an existing load balancer. And from here, we can choose the load balancer that we created. So once you drop this down, we should then see that the load balancer we created, the web one. And let's go into the health check. So with a health check for health check grace period, I'll set this one to 80 seconds, and then I can proceed to click on next. So this is where you set up the maximum number of instances and also your desirable instance. So I'll keep the desired capacity to 1. So that means one instance should be running at all time. And then here is the auto scaling limit. So I'll have a minimum of 1, but a maximum of, let's say, 5. That means it can scale up to 5 instances depending on the loads. All right, so once you have that one set, let's set this one to target tracking scaling policy. All right, so once we select that, then we'll be able to obviously use the metrics to control our scaling automatically. So we'll use an average CPUs for the scaling. And for the warm up, we'll set this one to probably 50 All right, yeah, I'll make it 70 seconds for the warm up. So with that one set, we can then proceed to click on next. We're not going to add any notifications, so go to the next, and for tags, no tags will be added. And once we click on that next, then we can scroll down to create our auto scaling group. So this will take a while to create. So while this is obviously it's being created, you can always click on this to get more information. For example, we'll be able to check on the monitoring and see if there's anything, but you need to wait for this to update first. But we're looking at what's going on here. So when we click on the EC2 instances, once the instance is up and running, then we should start to see some CPU metrics and other metrics here as well. So let's give it a few more moments to see what happens. So it's showing us one instance. So let's select it and then click on, let's say, activity, just to see if there's any activity showing up here. There's none. Let's check the instance management. Nothing so far, but it's showing at healthy. As you can see, it's now showing up now. So the one instance is running and it's healthy as well. So we are all good on that. All right, so now let's go into the monitoring session again and see if there's any instances data showing up here. So nothing so far. Let's give it a few more minutes as well to see what happens. By the way, you can also refresh this directly from here. So when you click on this button, it should refresh the metrics information. All right, still no data. So let's, whilst you're waiting, let's check something else. So let's go into the target group. And then let's see the target information as well. Let's refresh the target information here. There you go. So we see that there's one instance running and it's also healthy as well. When you go into your EC2 instance session here as well, we should be able to see the instance running. So let's refresh this one here. So there you go. We got one instance running. To access that instance, we can go to our load balancer and then we should be able to find the DNS for this instance. So once you go on the load balancer, select the load balancer under the detail panel. When you scroll down, we should find the DNS for our instance. So once you click on it, open up a new tab, we should be able to now access our website. There you go. So that works perfectly fine. And when you go back to here, we can try to intentionally terminate the instance and see what happens. So to do that, let's go into the instance session here. So what we're doing here is trying to mimic a scenario whereby a web server is not healthy. So by terminating it, we can actually essentially replicate that scenario. So what we do is, we can select that and then we can terminate the instance. So I'm just going to select it again, then delete the instance. So if everything's worked well, based on the checks we have in place to constantly check the health of the instance, it will identify the instance is down, and then it should spin up a new instance to replace this one here, right? So what we can do is we can observe this whole process by going into our auto scaling session here and selecting our auto scaling, and then we can check the activity session here. So this will give you information about what is actually going on. So nothing is showing up on the activity yet. Let's see the auto scaling instance manager. Let's go to the target group as well and see what we got here. See how many targets. All right, so now there's no target group. So hopefully it should spin up a new instance to replace this one. So I'm just going to go back to the instance and see if it's showing as terminated. So it's showing as terminated now. So as you can see, there's another instance that came up to obviously serve our website. So it might take a bit of time for this to fully run all the services that we need. So when you refresh here, it might probably not show that it's running, but eventually it should kick in the web server application, and then it should start to run our website as well. Right, but we can go back in here and then go into the auto scaling section here, and then when you select this and under activity, let's see if we get any activity there. I'm not seeing any activity here, but essentially we should be able to, here you go. So as you can see from here, one instance was terminated, and now there's a new instance that came in to replace that. So that's the first instance I intentionally deleted. And now our web server is running, no glitches, all good. So that's indication of our auto scaling working as intended. All right, so what we're going to do next is to test out the stressing of our web server. Before we proceed, let's first of all go under the auto scaling group, select the auto scaling, and then select monitoring just to see the CPU's utilization. So as you can see here now, you can see there's a CPU usage going on. So we're going to intentionally spike this CPU and see how our autoscaler will instantly scale up with another instances to handle the load. So to do that, we need to SSH into the EC2 instance. So let's go ahead and select the EC2 instance, and then what we will do is, right, we will then connect to it by SSH, and then we can run a stress test to increase the CPU utilization and see how it actually performed by auto scaling. So scroll back up to your instances section here, select the running instance or right click the running instance, and then you can connect to it. So click on connect, and we're going to use the EC2 instance section here. So we're just simply going to click on connect and connect it directly in the browser. So once it's connected, then we can run a stress test directly from here on this instance. So once the instance's CPU spikes, it should now auto scale. So I'm just going to paste the command, the stress test here, run the stress test. So this will continuously hog the CPU usage. So once this is running, we can go back to our EC2 instance here, go to the auto scaling section here and see what is going on in terms of our scaling. All right, I still don't see any activity under the activity session. All right, let me just check the load balancer session too. Under the target group session, under this target group session, we only have one instance running. So when this spikes up, when the CPU spikes up, we should in effect see multiple instances running to support the load. So let's check the load. So let's go into the auto scaling session again, select our instance, and then let's click on monitor. And then what we will do is we select the EC2 instances just to see the spike going on. So at the moment, it's spiking up to 84. Let's give it a few moments to see what happens. So as you can see now, there's one pending instance coming up, because now it identified that there's load on the running instances and there's one coming up. So if you go into the target group session, we should equally see that there's a new instance coming up. So you select your target group, and then when you click on target, It's currently showing us 1. So eventually we should see 2. So actually, as you can see, there's 1 initializing. Right. We can also check the monitoring session and see the spike of our usage. So as you can see, it's now heading like 100% CPU. So which indicate that that instance is not enough to support our load. So that means a new instance have to be in place to help handle the load. So that's what we're seeing here. Yeah, for some reason, I'm not seeing any activities here, but in terms of what we are expecting, everything is working as intended. So when you go back to the target group here, and then you go back to the target, the target session here, you notice that there are another instance is still initializing. So once that become healthy, then it will also start to serve web content. All right. You can also see the same information when you go directly into the instances session here. That's when you see the ones we first terminated, the current running one, and the other instance that is coming up to help to support the load. So we can refresh this page once more. And as you can see, we got 2 instances running. It's still going through status check, but once that is done, that will be up and running to support our workload. Right, so as you can see, there's a third one coming up because the load keeps spiking up, and the more it goes up, the more instances that it requires. And as you already are aware of, I set up my maximum EC2 instance that should come up will be as 5. So it will come up, all these instances will come up once there's one, so far as there are more loads being put on the web server to handle the load. Right, so I hope you have learned how to set up auto scaling and also load balancer through this session. If this video helped you out, definitely make sure you do subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.